Hey there, King of Kings family. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Sunday Sermons, our weekly deep dive into the weekend message. This podcast is our opportunity to expound a little bit on what was preached on Sunday and find a little extra meat on the bone. I'm Dan Hoppin, the director of Connect Groups at King of Kings, and joining me as always is my good friend and King of Kings confirmation and student coordinator, Caleb Hack.
That is quite a long title you have to say for me there. I love that.
Good friend?
Good friend.
You think that's
confirmation?
Yeah.
I mean, you add it all in there together. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
So let's talk a little bit. This week, Pastor Zach Zender compared the video game Frogger with Jonathan and his armor bearer taking on the Philistine army. It was a really good message, and we're going to dive into it. Before we do that, I need to know, Caleb, what's your history with Frogger? Did you play Frogger growing up? Do you know anything about this game?
Yeah, I know of it. I can't tell you if I have or haven't played the original Frogger. What was the car version he talked about? I've probably played that one, Crossy Road.
Oh, yeah.
I think. And then there's a very similar game it brought to my mind too called Flappy Bird. So I don't know if that was like a rage, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, where it's just a little bird dodging obstacles basically.
I remember that.
You collect coins along the way and he goes
Yes.
up and down, and so that was fun. Yeah, I've played a number of games like that are different versions of Frogger, but I don't know if I've played the original.
I don't know if I played the original either. We had something that was very close on the PlayStation 1. So it was a pretty old school game, and it actually you could play at the same time as someone else, like split screen, so you could compete against them to see who could get through it faster. And man, my sister kicked my butt. She was so good at Frogger. Faith, if you're listening to this, I hope that you retain those skills because She put me in my place.
I do think games are more fun with other people, so a two-player version of Frogger would be great.
For sure. All right, so how does Frogger connect to the Bible? That's what we're going to talk about today. This was the final week of our Game On series, which we used to explore what video games can teach us about our faith. And I'll admit that when we came into this series, I thought the concept was kind of out there. I was like, I'm not sure how this is going to work, but I've really, really liked each week. And I think that our pastors have done a great job finding these lessons from video games, both retro and current, that we've been able to kind of apply to our faith lives.
Yeah. It's been fun, definitely, the last 4 weeks. I think I connect a lot with the video game because I do play a lot of different kinds of video games, but just being able to see God in our everyday things that we participate in, whether it is video games or something else. I know it connects to a lot of younger generation people. So yeah, it's been cool to do this.
Yeah, it's been fun to see kids excited in the hallways and all the decorations that we've had. But yeah, mostly I've really learned some cool stuff these last couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about some of that today. Like we mentioned off the top, Pastor Zach focused on the game Frogger and how it can teach us the importance of taking big leaps of faith. So, Caleb, as you look at this message, I know that you got a chance to listen to it. What is going to last beyond Sunday from this message for you?
I think a couple of things will last with me. Just number one, being able to trust God with the future and know that He's got it in His hands. Because like in Frogger, you're jumping from log to log or lily pad or whatever it is along the way, and you just have to trust that next thing is going to be there for you. And sometimes, God opens doors or, closes doors, and that just leaves us with, different opportunities, maybe than we even expected, because God knows what's best for us and what we need. And so that, along with Zach at the end of his message talked about, getting to this story and understanding God's story a little bit. And I think there are so many stories of God showing up in the Bible, but also in, people that I know in each other's lives. And so when God shows up, it's amazing to see what He can do.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into more of that. I want to just kind of lay out what we're talking about just in case somebody needs a refresher or they missed the sermon on Sunday. Zach kind of anchored his message in 1 Samuel 14. So at this point, the Israelites they were in a rough place. They were severely outnumbered by the Philistine army. They honestly, like in a wild turn of events, didn't have any swords or spears, which is just kind of wild. But Jonathan and his armor bearer, so Jonathan is King Saul's son, the king of Israel, they decided, hey, we're going to go take on this giant group of the Philistines, the people they were fighting against, which just seemed like a ludicrous idea, but they did it, and they ended up conquering a bunch of these people, and then God used an earthquake to throw the rest of the Philistine army into confusion to the point where they were killing each other. And Israel ended up routing the Philistines. I don't even know if you can say Israel. I guess they routed themselves. God routed them. But it's this amazing story that is basically, it's a leap of faith by Jonathan and his armor bearer, these two guys who decided to take on an army because they thought that God wanted them to, and it obviously paid off majorly in their favor.
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite Bible stories, but I haven't read it in a long time, so it was a good refresher to go back into it. And I think to kind of reiterate what you said, like initially the Israelites had won some battles. I think they had 3,000 men. They kind of ended up splitting into different groups, and then you have 1,000 men, and it literally says here, 1 Samuel 13 verse 5, the Philistines mustered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen and troops like the sand on the seashore in multitude. Like a massive army, and they're split up now. There's 1,000 guys with David and Jonathan, or with just Jonathan, right? And then like literally versus 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and then troops that
we don't even know how many
they couldn't
soldiers.
even count. Like, so unbelievable odds. And I think, those unbelievable odds are where God shows up again and again and again. And that's what's so amazing is to see how God does show up here, because, a lot of times we think we can take things into our own hands and do things our way, or we have a plan or an idea and we try to work something out through our own power, and that it just falls flat, right? But God, his plan is different, and he's not always moving the way we think until we look back and see it. And so, trusting God with our future, I think, I said was the first thing that really stuck out to me, because God makes a way. No matter what it is, God makes a way.
The word that Zach really focused on, and I'm glad that he did this, is the word perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go to 1 Jonathan 14:6. So this is before Jonathan and the armor bearer have attacked, and they're just talking. And Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." But focus on that word. Perhaps the Lord will work on our behalf. There was no guarantee of victory here. And actually, if when you get to the end of 1 Samuel, we learn that Jonathan eventually loses his life in battle. So he's a great warrior, but he's not invincible by any means. But he had faith. He just said, perhaps. I believe that God is going to work in our favor. So let's go do this.
Yeah.
That really stood out to me.
Yeah. There's no way for our human minds to know, what God's going to do. But that's where like faith comes into the picture, because, God asks us to have faith. I love the verse in Hebrews 11 verse 1 that Pastor Zach brought up. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So hope, I think, is kind of the other side of that, perhaps, right? Perhaps could be a negative, like, I don't know, but it could also be hopeful to say, I think God's going to show up. I think he's going to do something. And to go beyond just saying I think or I hope, but to actually believe it and have faith that God is going to move.
So you talked about one of your main takeaways was people's stories. Tell me more about that. What was impactful about that?
I mean, there's just so many stories in the Bible where God shows up. I wrote down a few of them just to
Please,
I
yeah.
mean, every chapter in the Bible is about where God shows up. But the first thing I thought about, so God called the Israelites to be his people and led them out of slavery into Egypt, and they didn't know where to go. God shows up for them, as a pillar of fire in the day and a pillar of cloud in night to lead them, kind of a miraculous way that he does that. He also split the Red Sea for them. Like, God showed up when they thought there was no way forward. God showed up to Elijah, the prophet, when he was, at his worst, down in the dumps and looking for a sign from
suicidal.
God.
Yeah.
And God shows up as a still small voice. And so it's not always the way that we expect. Like, he was looking for God in an earthquake or in a fire or something like that. And God's just a still small voice. I thought of how God showed up for the Israelites again with Jericho. God gives them this outrageous battle plan of marching around the city and blowing trumpets, and they're like, how's this gonna conquer our enemies? And God knocked down the walls because of that. And then I thought about Jonah and the whale, right? Like, God called Jonah to do something he didn't want to do. And he ends up in this bad situation where he's on a boat in a storm and he knows it's his fault. And so he jumps in the water and God sends a whale. He shows up, God shows up and saves Jonah and brings him to land. And then encourages Jonah to continue with his mission. All the way through those Old Testament stories, God continually shows up for his children, the Israelites. And then God shows up himself as a child, as baby Jesus, in the most unexpected way to be our savior. And then even for, his followers after, Jesus, died and rose again and then told his followers to go and share the gospel to the whole world. He shows up at Pentecost, when they least expect it, with a wind and with flames over their heads and speaking in tongues. Like, God just keeps doing miracles and doing amazing, things in ways that we don't expect. And so that's what I think of, like, when you think of, like, there's more to this story, like, get the story that God is going to be there for you.
Those are all great examples. I mean, obviously, and we could keep going. We could go all day. I think some people, especially skeptics, would say those are a bunch of old fairy tales from a book that I don't believe in. I'm not seeing God show up in my life. And I just don't think that's true.
No.
I think if you honestly look at your life, yes, there might be some areas where you'd say, man, my life is not where I want it to be. But if you look at it as a whole and the blessings that you have, God shows up for you, especially in the biggest moments when you need him the most. Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to go into the whole story because I know it's a long one, but your birth story of your daughter is a miracle. It's miracle on top of miracle in a situation that very quickly could have become pretty dicey.
Yeah.
God showed up for you guys,
Yeah.
and he got you to the hospital, and he gave you a safe delivery, and now you've got a 1-year-old girl
Yes. Yeah.
who is just beautiful and blossoming. Like, he showed up in that moment.
It was amazing. Yeah. Like you said, there was a lot that did not go at all as we planned. And, 3 nights in the hospital after she was born with my wife recovering, like, there was a moment where I didn't know if April was going to be okay, if my wife was going to be fine. And God, worked through the doctors and nurses to make sure that she was okay. And so that's a miracle. I think too. So, I don't know that I've spoken a lot about it, but I have asked for a lot of prayers because my dad was diagnosed with cancer recently. And so he has lung cancer, and it has metastasized to his hip. So that's not a good outlook. But he went in last week to the oncologist, and they said, we don't know how it metastasized because it's not in your blood, it's not in your lymph nodes. And so they said, you don't have to do chemo like we thought. You just have to take these pills and do like radiation pills basically, and then a lobectomy. And they think, like, you know what, that has a chance of actually curing it. And that they literally use that word cure. And like, we're like, okay, that's not what we first thought. We thought there was no way. Like, we were looking at this thinking, like, I was literally going over to my parents, early last week before this appointment, and I was like, I don't know, how many months my dad has left. Like, it seemed that bad to me. Kind of worst case scenario, like, we could only have months. I'm like, I got to make memories, take pictures, of him with his granddaughter now. But then we get this like miraculous report, like, you know what, we think we can do a lot more to help this, and like, he's fine. You know what, my dad's a positive guy anyway, but like, he was just over the moon, like, I don't have to go through the whole chemo process. Like, unbelievable, and nothing short of a miracle. So, you know what, all the Bible stories are there for us to look at and learn from, but it's our own personal stories too that I think have the greatest impact. And there's millions of people that have seen God show up for them, whether they know it or not. I'm sure everyone can think of something.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of ties back into, the main point that Zach made, and that's identifying when to take a big leap of faith in your life, because you can look at your life and you can look at the lives of those around you, and seeing when God showed up, you say, okay, this is what are some opportunities for me to step out in faith and either grow my faith or help other people through my actions. Maybe it's something that might be self-sacrificial. Maybe it's something that doesn't seem like a win in the short term, but it has a chance to come through in the long run. And taking those leaps of faith they can be total game changers for your life.
Yeah, I think the real thing that stops us from taking those leaps of faith, as Zach talked about, is fear. I think today, honestly, in our rev with all staff today, Julie talked about those things that, we hold on to tightly, whether it's like control or perfectionism or, wanting to please people, those kinds of things that get in the way of us doing what really is best for us. And I know that, she kind of was talking about that more in a management kind of way. But for me, like, fear a lot of times is why, like, I don't do things I should, or I do things differently instead. And it's because, like, I don't always think I'm the best person for the job, or I don't think I'm, in the right place. But trusting that God has called me and being able to look back and see the ways that he's moved is going to help to overcome that fear, and just being open about it too. So having people to talk to about things and to go off of that, because you know what, God's going to, send my enemies into a frenzy if I just trust him to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Zach, he made a good point. He said, going back to that word, perhaps, we in our lives usually aim to take the word perhaps out of the equation. We don't want the perhaps. We want to know.
We want to control it
with certainty. Yeah, we want to control it as much as possible. And so when we're encountered with a situation where we literally have no idea and we have no control over what's going to happen to us, it's kind of terrifying. But those are those moments where you have to lean on your faith. You have to look at your life and the lives of those around you and say, my God can, my God will, but even if he doesn't, I'll continue to trust him and praise him.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, really easy to say. It's really, really hard to do, but this is what God calls us to. And I can almost, see it like as people are questioning and looking at their lives and saying, God, where are you? I can almost see him just on the sidelines being like, I got you. Just look how many times I've come through for you in your life. I'm not going to leave you this time.
Yeah.
This will be okay. And I love you. Like, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. The God of the universe who created everything and has control over everything loves each one of us individually. So
Yeah, I've got this song running through my head right now. I don't know if we've done it here. Maybe a while ago. I think it's an Elevation song called "Do It Again."
Oh yeah.
I've seen you move the mountains, and I believe
I'll
you're
see
going to
you
do it again.
Yeah.
Like you make a way when there's no way, and I believe you're going to do it again. Just such a good picture of who God is, because he does big things. And sometimes he does small things that we don't notice as well, but he's going to do it. He's going to do it again for us because, we trust in him and we know that he's God and he's worthy of our praise. And so we praise him for those things that he does, and he's going to keep showing up for us.
I love that you brought that song up, and it is by Elevation. So I would encourage you, maybe as like a little action point coming out of this podcast, go throw on Spotify, YouTube, whatever it is, go listen to that song, because it is a really good reminder of everything that God has done for us. We're going to wrap it up there. King of Kings family, let's keep living our faith lives beyond Sunday.